Hey guys, I'm Dmitry with Canucks, and today we'll be taking a look at G-Sync.
Yeah, it's G-Sync.
So essentially what G-Sync does is it solves for the asynchronous nature of how our hardware operates, of how GPU communicates with your monitor. Your monitor refreshes a frame in hertz, so it is a cycle. It will refresh itself in the specified number of hertz, so common is 60 hertz. It will refresh itself 60 times a second. You also have the faster panels of 120 and 144 hertz gaming panels. Now the graphics card will pump out a frame as soon as that's ready. So whenever the two don't align, whenever the graphics card is ready to pump out a frame in the middle of the refresh rate, we get tearing. And that's a nasty artifact that we've so gotten accustomed to, especially for gaming. And that's very common on 60 hertz panels, especially if you go above the 60 FPS limit, as the graphics card was able to pump out more frames than the monitor can essentially accept, and that's very common. There are several ways to actually fix tearing, and that's enabling vsync. What vsync does is it locks the frame rate, locks the ceiling frame rate to your maximum refresh rate of your monitor. So for 60 hertz panels with vsync on, you'll see the frame rate cap at 60 FPS. Now what happens when your frame rate drops below 60 is we get stuttering when frames are repeated, and that's also nasty. Now there's also adaptive vsync, which Nvidia released last year. It will turn on vsync as soon as you hit that refresh rate cap, and it will turn off vsync when you go below that. It works in most cases. There's some issues with compatibility with gaming. In some cases, it doesn't turn on vsync, so you do still encounter stutter and encounter tearing. And that's where G-Sync comes in as
G-Sync.
Yeah, G-Sync. Because G-Sync is a hardware solution, so it replaces the scaler board on your monitor with the G-Sync board in the G-Sync module, and it essentially syncs the frame output from your graphics card to the refresh rate of your monitor. So it's a variable refresh rate that is controlled by what is being pumped out from your graphics card. So we don't get tearing and we don't get stuttering, which is really cool. Now G-Sync does have a frame ceiling and a frame floor. The ceiling is determined by the hertz, the refresh rate of your monitor. For 60 panels, it will be 60 FPS. For 120 and 144 hertz panels, it will be that respectively. And for the frame floor, it is 30 FPS. Below 30 FPS, if you encounter that in game, you will encounter stutter. So there's some limitation, but there's that really sweet spot for G-Sync between 40 and 60 FPS for 60 hertz panels that it looks buttery smooth. There's absolutely no stuttering, and visually it actually feels like you're playing at 60 FPS while in fact you're playing something slightly below. As I mentioned before, G-Sync is a hardware solution. It does require a specific G-Sync module to be installed inside the monitor, but there's also a couple other criteria that you have to meet in order for G-Sync to work. First, you need a GTX 650 Ti Boost or higher Kepler GTX graphics cards from Nvidia. You need DisplayPort 1.2. Currently, this is the only display input and output that is supported with G-Sync, but there's no reason why DVI or HDMI won't work. It will work, but currently DisplayPort is the only port that they've adopted with G-Sync. There's no resolution cap, so G-Sync, aside from what we've seen up to today, will work with 4K panels, 8K panels down the road eventually, so there's no resolution cap. There's no restrictions on the panel type either, so it will work VA, IPS, TN panels, and all the others. So it's not unrealistic to say that we won't see 4K IPS 60 Hz panels with G-Sync. It's not likely, but what we're seeing and what we've seen at CES is a lot of monitor companies are jumping on board because G-Sync is definitely an innovative and exciting and very useful technology for smoothing out your gameplay. And where it will really shine, as we've seen at CES, a lot of companies are releasing 1440p and 16p monitors that are higher resolution at 60 Hz. They're still TN panels, unfortunately, but there's no reason why we won't see IPS panels being rolled out as soon as the consumer is ready for G-Sync. And the reason why I say that is because throughout my testing with this Asus monitor, this is a 144 Hz gaming panel. But I'm coming from a background of 60 Hz IPS monitor. That's what I have at home. That's what I game with. So I first tested out G-Sync on, vsync on, and everything off. Just plain old, sort of regular, without any type of assistance. And what I've noticed jumping in Assassin's Creed 4 is a lot of tearing at 60 Hz. Running around. There's a lot of tearing inside the game. Turning on vsync does not help because I wasn't always above the 60 FPS mark, so I didn't counter stutter. Turning on G-Sync, it was mind-blowing because now you have this ability to have extremely smooth gameplay, and while you're still hitting that below 60 FPS mark, you're not encountering any stutter. It was a lot smoother than what you would encounter with vsync on and without vsync either, which was very impressive. Now, jumping into Metro Last Light, it was the same idea. Lots of stuttering with vsync on, quite a bit of tearing depending on how fast you're moving without anything, without any assistance. And turning on G-Sync, it again brings out that very fluid and smooth gameplay at frame rates below 60 FPS. Based on this experience, I think that what we're likely to see with G-Sync is high resolution panels that you can use for gaming, and you can bump up the settings so that you're not necessarily hitting the 60 FPS gap, but if you're staying between 40 to 50 to 60 frames, you can still experience the fluid motion with cranked up settings without experiencing any stutter. And so I think that's where G-Sync will truly shine. Now, tearing is very common if your frame rate is above your refresh rate. So for a lot of FPS titles, if you're gaming on a 60 Hz panel and your frame rate is above 60, so like 70 plus, then you're most likely encountering tearing. That's because the graphics card is pumping out frames that the monitor cannot accept, and therefore the frames are drawn in the middle of the refresh rate. And that's tearing is also part of the game engine design and how the API handles frames and how it handles resource management. And so when I jumped into Battlefield 4, playing at 60 Hz without any assistance, vsync off, G-Sync off, I was playing at 90 frames a second and I was getting no tearing at all. So it does bring out the fact that it does solve for tearing, but then there's also good game engine design that also comes into play when it comes to resolving this type of artifact. This is a 144 Hz panel, so obviously I turned that on to just experience how that would work. And first of all, playing without vsync and without G-Sync in Assassin's Creed 4, doing exactly the same sequence, and one thing that I noticed, there was no tearing. The refresh rate of the monitor is so fast that the frames that are being pumped out from the graphics card, is the chances of it hitting the frame in the middle of the refresh rate are a lot lower. And so I encountered almost no stuttering whatsoever, and at least not as noticeable, and I was very pleased. And the same thing with Battlefield 4 and Metro Last Light, where 144 Hz panels and gaming at that refresh rate, it did solve for tearing. But tearing also can occur with variable frame rates. It can occur if your frame rate is below the refresh rate. It can occur if you're above the refresh rate. So having the 144 Hz panel helps, but it's not the solution. So while turning on G-Sync with the 104 Hz panel, playing Assassin's Creed 4, it was absolutely smooth, like what we've seen, what I've experienced on 60 Hz. But the difference between G-Sync on and G-Sync off at the 144 Hz panels at faster refresh rate wasn't as significant as was with 60 Hz gameplay. And that's where I think that, again, I'm coming back to this idea that 60 Hz for G-Sync with IPS panels, great color accuracy, is going to be key, and utilizing this technology for, aside from gaming experience, but also multimedia experience. So not just having a single gaming monitor, but having a gaming monitor or a monitor that can game and do all other things aside from gaming with G-Sync is very beneficial. Based on what we've seen at CES, a lot of the monitor manufacturers are releasing G-Sync ready monitors with DisplayPort only connectivity. And while I would say it's a slight limitation, I would love to see manufacturers implement more display connectivity so you can connect to something else, perhaps if you don't want to use G-Sync. but that's something that we'll see where it goes down the road in 2014. Of course, price is also a big one. The current premium on top of a regular monitor would be $100 plus if you want to buy a G-Sync ready monitor. But Nvidia is also selling G-Sync DIY kits that are $199, and you have to ask yourself whether or not this price premium is worth it for an already sort of an expensive panel like 104 Hz panels that go around $300 to $500 range. So adding that extra premium is not for everybody. So if you're a gamer, if you're a serious gamer, you sort of have to juggle around to see whether or not you can live with tearing or you want to try out G-Sync. Now, based on my experience with G-Sync, the wonderful few weeks I've had with it, my gaming experience have improved significantly because I no longer have to worry about stutter. I no longer have to worry about tearing. And especially for 60 Hz high resolution IPS panels that I would love to see with G-Sync, that's going to be the selling point for myself. But what do you guys think? Do you think this is a technology that will move forward and will sort of take over the gaming world? Not the gaming world, but it's going to be a very popular thing for gamers to utilize. I think so, especially for 60 Hz, like I'm saying, high resolution and good quality panels. That's where it will shine. And so far, what we've seen from G-Sync, we're very impressed. So guys, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.
Yeah, it's G-Sync. Yeah!
I think that's the winner.